beautiful. And that's what it's all about, is getting ahead of the incident power curve. Anybody can react. It's the company officer that makes the tactical decisions and doesn't get so sucked into pull in line, which is critical. You have to have good line management, but you should have trained your firefighters well enough to where they could be dealing with kinks and stretching line, which gives the company officer a little more flexibility to put his head on a swivel, anticipate tactical decision-making, and actually drive the incident, not just have his head down and pull hose. Although kinks and hose lines are everyone's job. So that's what it's all about, is getting ahead of the power curve. Let's talk about an incident we had about 4 days ago. It came in at about, I'm guessing, 3 in the morning. We had a commercial structure fire. It came in as a warehouse fire. And what I'm going to do is walk everybody through, again, some of the initial tactics, size-up considerations made by the initial company officer, because he really drove the incident and did an outstanding job. Fire came in at about 3 in the morning. Warehouse fire, visible flames from the roof on dispatch. So the first arriving company officer had a 3-person engine. In addition, he had a 2-person fire medic crew. So they're firefighters. Essentially, he had a 5-person engine. So what he did is he got his own water, and I believe he laid it dry and had the next in pumped to him just to get things moving quick, because he knew he had a second in company there quick. So he was thinking water supply early is the point. He spotted out of the collapse zone, but within a good shot of that initial stretch, and he left plenty of room for any truck companies that were coming in. All good things. They dumped a couple of 2.5s on the ground early, which is our standard operating procedure. Get the first one going, and his crew of 5 were initiating fire attack with the second line on the ground for a 2-out team to come in and support them. And so that was great. Line selection was excellent. Water supply was considered early. And en route, I got to give the battalion chief a lot of kudos, because his captain was so focused on the initial sequence, they didn't think about a second alarm. Battalion chief simply said, "Do we want a second alarm on this? You got working fire from a commercial." He said, "Yeah." So they busted a second out very, very early, which was kudos to the battalion chief. This is all part of that size-up process. He's seeing in his mind what the captain's telling him based on his excellent arrival report. So they're all on the same page. We have a very strong regional SOG on commercial tactics, and the line placement was beautiful. They had a man door next to a roll-up door. The man door was a quick force, and they put the line in place really fast and were able to essentially knock down the forward progress of the fire, which had already blown through the roof. The next engine, being proactive, not only supported their water supply, but came up to support them on their attack lines and brought tools with them. And this is another thing that we need to see you as company officers out there and crews, is don't walk up to a fire without tools in your hand. And I'm not talking about an SCBA and a helmet. I'm talking about tools, anything appropriate for the job at hand. In this case, they brought forcible entry irons and circular saws. The beautiful thing is they were able to cut open the roll-up door and have it open before the first routing truck even got there, which was adjacent to the man door, which really helped us out. This is all about building the incident from the ground up. So now you've got 3 companies in place tactically. The first truck went to the roof. They spotted, again, outside the collapse zone, but ahead of the fire. So they were in a position to ladder the building with their aerial and get ahead to be in a position to not only perform offensive heat cuts, but also to perform defensive strips and stop the forward progress to protect the majority of the building. So that was outstanding. The subsequent truck went to the opposite corner, laddered the corner, and came at it from the opposite direction to take care of the exposure on the Bravo side. Again, good roof operation. So the only thing left in that scenario now, not only thing, but the next priority was search. Now, obviously, this is not an apartment building. This is not even a home. This is a obviously vacant. Basically, there's no cars in the parking lot. It's 3 in the morning. But we did perform search with initial companies, the first alarm companies, and got a quick all clear on the exposures and worked our way in. The point is that everybody was thinking ahead. Everybody was thinking, how is what we're doing as a crew working in concert with the crews around us, and are we thinking ahead? So we had plenty of water, plenty of supply, aggressive vertical vent and search going. and forceful entry was very aggressive as well. I came in as the 2nd Battalion Chief. The 1st Battalion Chief took command. I came in relatively quickly after him and assumed Division Alpha. Now, in this case, the building was perpendicular to the street. So all the entry points were, if you're looking at it from the street, would have been on what you would have called Delta. However, that was a parking lot, and there were roll-ups and man doors, and that's where we were all entering from. So I told command, we're going to call this Alpha, and this is where all the crews are entering from primarily. The opposite side was there at Fort Charlie, and I managed up, I think I had about 7 or 8 companies at the peak of this thing in multiple units, the primary occupancy and the exposures, doing a combination of fire attack, search, secondary search, and then ultimately salvage overall. And so he took the majority of the alarm and funneled it through me, which reduced the span of control. But more importantly, and it reduced radar traffic. So now we're starting to attack the NIOSH 5. Size up was good. We had a good incident command structure because we had divisions in place early, and accountability was right there. I had accountability of the crews, and the captains had accountability of the individuals in their crews. And it was ongoing. It was what Ed and I like to call active accountability. I didn't have to say stand by when he said give me a par. I knew where everybody was at all times. And I was able to straddle the tactical arena. I was able to go in. I had a pack on my back. And I was able to go in a few feet, talk to the crews inside face-to-face, use a tick and look at the overhead, and then step back, look at the roof conditions, look at the fire conditions from the roof, look at it was a tilt-up building, look at the pilasters and the seams of the walls, and really be in a position to cover their back and then call for resource requests from command. And that enhanced communications. Another one of the NIOSH 5 is you didn't have 6 or 7 companies talking to command through their masks and not understand what the hell they're saying. So it really worked out nice. It's something that we've been working on for years up there to try and get in place, and it worked well. And that can work for you on a house fire, an apartment fire, a commercial fire. The idea is you get the initial task level crews who are doing the work in place. As soon as appropriate, you backfill them with a tactical level division or group supervisor who can manage them, communicate for them, and they can communicate through him or her to command. That person's orbiting and looking at the bigger picture for command. He's the eyes and ears of command and can therefore manage and have better accountability. And so that's really the fabric of what we're talking about in this program and this show. We're just going to apply it to different types of incidents that we're having. Ed?
No, I agree, and it sounds like you guys, handled it. And I think the biggest thing there that to bring home is an initial incident commander, building from the ground up, and I've said this before, but I think it's worth saying again, is when you initiate an action at the task level, maintaining your unit identifier is going to be critical for the communication chain. And I hear this a lot, and I love the fact that they're eager. But a lot of times, I'll get on scene and I'll give an assignment. I'll say, Engine 1, I need you to, initiate fire attack through the Alpha Division. Your objective is to identify, locate, and confine the fire. And oftentimes, very young, aggressive, great officers will come back and say, copy, Engine 1's got fire attack. No, your objective is to initiate fire attack through the Alpha Division. You're not assuming that functional group, because what ends up happening is that they'll come back calling themselves fire attack.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they either want to call themselves fire attack or they want to call themselves interior or interior attack or whatever. So I think it's important for us to reemphasize that as an incident commander, when you communicate, and the difference between initiation and assumption, when you communicate what that person is doing, that person needs to understand what their communicative designation will be. And that's important because if you roll in as my second chief, and we're very lucky where I work, we get 2 chiefs on every firstborn, is I want to be able to look to you and say, hey, Andoni, I'm going to assign you to Alpha Division, or hey, Andoni, I want to assign you to Interior. and say, you have working for you these 4, these 5 individual units based upon their identifier,
right.
and not confuse the companies that are working operating interior by having some guy think he's interior, and now I'm assigning him to Alpha Division. And I realize it's just words, but Brian Humphreys from LA City said it best: words have meaning. And he did. I mean, he said that, and that was like an epiphany. Words have meaning. In the word initiation, and the word assumption has a meaning. The word Alpha Division and the word attack group has a meaning. And it also has a function and a task associated. So people need to truly understand what the verbiage means and how it can affect the fireground. Because inevitably, as the fireground expands, people need to know not only who they're working for and who's working for them, but they also need to understand the orderly chain of communication and how that flows and how that can affect overall fireground accountability. Because you can have all the Camp Snoopy directors in the world with all the little, tin whizzy boards and all the dog tags and Velcro tags and the electronic unit identifiers and the microchip in the back of your head, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, true accountability comes down to the company officer knowing where his people are, where he's at in the building, and communicating that to the people he's working for. That's true accountability. An accountability board has never saved a life.
Yeah, never. I've never thrown an accountability board into a building and said, "Go get everybody." It's comical that we spend money and time on these so-called tools like Velcro passports, accountability boards, and like you said, we stick a GPS up some guy's butt. I think that's going to take the place of command presence and good old-fashioned fireground control, and it doesn't. And what I was saying, go ahead.
Oh well, no. And when you said good old-fashioned, and I'll just bring it back to when I started on the job, 26 years ago, which was the captain that I worked for, Kurt Fisher, knew exactly where I was at every moment of the day. You know why? Because if he wasn't behind me, I was holding on to the back of his turnout coat. And literally, the first 6 months of my career, I literally held on to his turnout coat. You know what I mean? That was, that was accountability right there. Because those old school captains, I don't know where they grew up, on the farms or, Vietnam or whatever. I'll tell you what, you didn't leave their side. And inevitably, when you were in a building and the smoke was to the ground and things were turning, to dog snot, you felt pretty good because you knew he was right there and he knew where you were at all times. And I don't think we have that anymore. I think Super Mario screwed that whole up.
No, it did screw it up because everyone is empowered in their life and everyone has got control, can make decisions, can challenge authority, and can decide, no, I don't want to be part of the team and I'm being harassed. But at the end of the day, that's not enough anymore. Even that old school kick you in the butt is not enough. It's great and it's the foundation and it's critical, but it's not enough. And what we're talking about, what Ed and I are talking about, everybody, is the use of ICS to actually not hamper your operation, but enhance it. And what he said earlier is critical. If you're inside of a building working and you're stretching line, you're putting fire out, you're doing a search, you're doing whatever you're doing, if you're using ICS to its potential to make your world easier, you're probably not reporting to command directly. If you're on a mast on an SCBA or you're on a roof on an SCBA and you can't see or you're task saturated, and your whole crew could have accountability and be together, and that's great. But it doesn't mean you know what the hell's above you, below you, or around you. And that could be fire conditions, smoke conditions, victims, building conditions that are about to deteriorate, or opposing hose lines. And the critical role is that division or group supervisor, that tactical level. If you're at the task level as Engine 1, you're probably reporting to either Division A or Fire Tech Group or some division or group soup who's outside of your hazard zone, just outside of it, at your point of entry, who's looking at where you went in, looking at the building and smoke conditions, looking at the roof above you, the floor below you if it's appropriate, and has a real idea of what your world is like and what you need, and is in face-to-face, hands-on contact with you as much as possible. Not always, but as much as possible. Case in point, that warehouse fire we had the other night, the captain was in about 15 feet. And they had a good knock on the fire by this time, and my main concern was the roof above them, what the conditions were, how much heat and or fire did we have, and what was the tenability of the roof. So I was in contact with the guys on the roof, and by radio, because they're on top of a commercial building, I'm out on the parking lot, but I was face-to-face with my crews, and so one of his crew members was at the door humping hose, and I yelled at him face-to-face, "Where's your captain?" He said, "He's 15 feet inside." And I just did it. The old-fashioned chain. I just said, "Tell him I want to see him as soon as he can." And so within about a minute, he came to the door. He had control of his crews, and he and I did a quick exchange. Didn't cost any radio traffic, and we had a very good, accurate exchange on what I was seeing, what he was seeing, and what we both agreed was the next priority and what we needed. And I had another captain who was coming into the division who had a thermal imaging camera, and I said, take a look at the overhead and tell me what you're seeing. And I even looked at it with him just to make sure I was seeing an accurate depiction of what these guys had above their heads. That's something you can't do for yourself necessarily. You might be able to use the tick and see above you a little bit, but you're not going to be able to see the walls and the roof above you from outside. You're not going to be able to see the smoke conditions outside and around you from inside, and that's what that div and group soup can do. And also be accountable at the door for when you went in and when you came out and what your air should be and all those kinds of things and what you need in rotating crews. It's just critical. On a house fire, it's the same principle. And again, I don't care if you call him interior, if you call him Division A, or if you call him by his battalion designator. In our system, we do this, but we have those tactical walking bosses maintain their battalion designator usually on a house fire, because a house is a very mobile thing where the battalion is probably orbiting a lot more than just staying put at one part of a building like a commercial. And we had that attic fire I mentioned earlier, and Battalion 5, Chief Shannon did a fantastic job. He showed up, thank God, because I had a lot of companies add themselves to the fire, as well as the initial alarm, as well as the second alarm called. So he was able to get a lap of the structure quickly, and he managed the interior operations of the building. I just called it Battalion 5, and the crews reported to him. They knew they were working for him, not me. And I had almost no companies on the inside of this house, which is a large house, with a heavy fire in the attic. I had almost none of them speaking directly to me. They were all going to him face to face as he was barking out orders and telling him what he needed and what he was seeing. And it worked beautifully. And I fully entrusted him to make tactical decisions and simply tell me what he needed from command. And I believe at the peak he had like 9 companies working for him in and out because we were rotating crews. And he did a yeoman's job on that fire. And it's the same principle as, if you've got an incident commander that has to have everybody report to him or her, that person is probably overtaxing the tactical channel, not providing good information back to the crews who need it, and the communication on the fire ground is probably lousy, as is the accountability. So you don't need to have 27 tactical channels. You just need to have the appropriate amount of groups and divisions to break up your span of control and increase your accountability and enhance your communication. So anyway.
Absolutely. And I want to have to drop off here in a second, but I wanted to add a couple quick things to that. The other thing is you don't need somebody at the incident command post holding your hand and assuming the role of operations. You need that guy, while you're sitting there, talking to the dispatcher, discussing the latest donut recipe. You need that tactical working boss out in the field of operations, in the field of play, taking care of the troops out there. And so if you get that second arriving chief officer, don't put them at the ICP and make them operations and say, all right, man, you can have operations. No, put them in the hot zone. Put them in the place where the most fire